Hello YouTube. This video we're going to be discussing Flathead Ford valve train. There's a lot of differences in the Flathead Ford from early to late, and then everybody's gone in there and changed stuff around. So when you get into your Flathead Ford, somebody may have already changed some stuff. So basically we're just going to talk about the valve train of a Flathead Ford and what the differences are. This one right here is what would have come off of a factory Flathead Ford. So that's the assembly that should be in your Flathead Ford if it's never been touched by anyone. How will you know? Well, what you will know that's distinctive of a Flathead Ford from other engines is right off the bat, the valve guide is a two-piece guide. You may have heard people reference a two-piece guide, and you may have never understood, what are they talking about? What do you mean a two-piece guide? A valve guide is always one piece. No. Back then, there were two pieces of a valve guide. And the reason it's two-piece, you probably already got some of y'all going, I see it, I see it, I see it. So, you could not push this in through that guide as much as you'd want to try. It ain't going to go through there. The head is bigger than the stem. It's not going to go through there. So they did it in a two-piece part. Why did they do that? Also, when the spring goes on, it has no keepers. The retainer is the keeper. So it's a retainer slash keeper. What does that mean? Well, see that? That's what holds this whole assembly together. So the retainer is the keepers. It was less weight up here. It was a simple setup. There's a clip still to hold everything together. A modern setup would be what we have here. Why is this a modern setup? Is because we have a smooth stem valve. This is actually a small block Chevy valve. A lot of people will use a small block Chevy valve. That's the common thing to do. Just go ahead and put a set of small block Chevy valves in there. Don't stop. There's a one-piece guide. See that? A one-piece guide. This is just like the original one, except being one piece because we don't need it to be in two pieces anymore. We can slide it together. We have a spring. This is a test spring, just so it's easier for me on my hands, and a retainer. Also, with the retainer, we have keepers. Just like a regular conventional Chevy, Ford, 302, Dodge, everything else. So that's the setup that we're going to replace this setup with. So there's our differences there. This is what you've probably seen. If you take your Flathead apart, it may already have this in here, this setup here. If not, that's what you're going to want to put in. If we're doing a restoration and you want to go with this setup here, it's a lot of work, but it can be done. It's just not really worth going to the extent of doing a two-piece guide. Now let's talk about when you first get your Flathead Ford and you get it to your house and it takes you 18 to 20 hours to take it apart and tons and tons and tons of beer. It's too frustrating. So it is frustrating. Why? This thing's been sitting forever. It's been parked for the most time. Everybody tells you it was running when I parked it. Okay. Here is what's actually going to happen when you pull one apart. That's pretty rare to even get this apart not damaged. I think we saved 5 of them in this particular engine that we pulled apart. This is what you're going to do. You're going to go take it apart and they're going to be stuck. You can't even turn it over to get the tool in. It's frozen. The ones that are sitting open or closed, you might get a few of them out there. For the most part, they're not going to come. Instead of damaging the block, this is what you're going to do. When you try to take this off, there's a slot right there at the end, just like with the one-piece guide. You put your tool in, you pull down, you pull the clip, you release, it all comes out. That was fine when it was brand new and it was made. It ain't going to happen anymore. It's going to be corroded, stuck, rusted in there. And there you go. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to try to move that down. It ain't going to come down. You're going to soak it. You might, after tapping a while and after enough prayer and enough beer, maybe get it to move enough where you can pull the clip out. A lot of times that's how you're going to get a clip out of here. They're not going to always come out just in one piece. For the most part, it's not going to come apart. I'm being a little bit of voice of reason so that you can go, why me? Why me? It happens to everybody. It would be foolish for me to make a video and showing you, oh, I got all these out of a motor. No, all of them have to not damage the block. You pretty much have to destroy all of these components, but we don't want to damage the block. Trying to get it down, you grab it, you're breaking guides, you're frustrated, cut the valves. Just go ahead and cut these valves. You're not going to use them anyway. Cut them all the heads off, and sometimes easier said than done. I know a lot of people get a torch in there and you know, however you do it, that's up to you, but cut the heads of the valves off, then reach in there with the punch after soaking them really good and drive the guide out. We're concerned of not damaging the block. All of these parts are going to be replaced anyway. You can see after I clean these how corroded they are. They've been heat soaked. All of the lubrication is out of it. They've been sitting for years. They're completely rusted. All right. That being said, now we're going to put on a better setup. A one-piece guide. Let's take this apart and look at it. A one-piece valve guide. Isn't that awesome? Also, there's a groove in here for a seal. The factory seal, it's a square seal that goes in there. And the factory Ford Flathead didn't even have a groove on the exhaust. They just had seals on the intake. There's a lot of controversy. Do you put the seals on the intake and exhaust? Do you put them just on the intake? When you buy these guides, if it's an SBI or an Urtel or all of the popular ones are machined just like the factory ones, except for the slot. So they do put those slots in it. I believe Red's Headers has the exhaust ones that don't have a groove cut in it at all. A lot of people don't put seals on the exhaust. They say you don't need it on the exhaust, and they also say that the exhaust gets hot, and these are going to glue themselves in there, and you'll never get them out. There's also Best Gaskets has a round O-ring. A lot of people have less frustrating and better luck putting in the round ones because it's round and it'll roll as it's going in, as opposed to a square one. If the bore is real sharp on the top, it will actually get caught and it'll actually tear this lip here. So a lot of times it's good to go ahead and when you got the block apart, take a sand roll and lightly bevel all of the bores so that they will go in. Either of the two are acceptable. A lot less frustrating are these. And here's the original style like the square ones. I'm a little old school. And the way that my uncle used to do them, which is the way that I still do it, is I use the square ones and I put them on the intake and the exhaust. If we pull a vacuum on our ports, try to pull a vacuum on an exhaust port without the O-rings in it, and it doesn't pull vacuum. It actually sucks air right through the guide. Everybody says it doesn't matter. Once it runs for a while, the carbon will go around the guide and seal right up. I'd rather have a perfectly sealed motor right from their initial startup. If the point that you're going to do a cam swap one day, well, then use the round ones. Go ahead and use the round ones. Don't put any on the exhaust. Do what everybody does. Don't follow what I'm doing. I'm not saying that you need to follow everything that I'm doing. Do it your way. Do it the way. Go to the forums. Go to the ham. Go everybody else. And do it the way they do it. And be happy. Sleep at night. All right. That's what I'm going to suggest. Okay. So here's the differences here from a one-piece guide. Now we know what the difference is of a two-piece guide. Now we know what the difference of a valve. We know why it had to be two-piece because of the mushroom head. All right. That's pretty much basically it. Now, when we're going to go set this stuff up, I'm going to go and put this together. It needs to be in the block to check install spring height. I can't check my install spring height right now. Oh, my installed spring height right now. Oh my God. You would think it'd be, 1/700. No, once you put it in the block and you assemble it and use your tool to squeeze this, put your clip on, that's your install height. That right there is your install height, not just sitting there on the bench. It needs to be in the block. So that's your install height. We're going on this particular set of springs. We're going with the 2-inch install height. That's what Iskandarian uses. a lot of the different cam manufacturers will be 2-inch, but there's different specs. When you get your springs, it will tell you 85 pounds at 2-inch, or it'll tell you spring pressure at a certain height. Brings up a good question. How much spring pressure do we want on a flathead Ford? You want about 85 pounds on a performance cam. I'll do a little less, 70 pounds. There's no need to put too much spring pressure. There's no reason for it. No reason for it. All we're doing is we're making less horsepower and we're wearing the parts more than we need to. There's no more zinc and phosphorus in our oils, and more spring pressure just puts more of a load on the lifter and the cam. No, not necessary. So we don't need 110 pounds on the spring. Old school guys that would do Chevys and Fords, performance motors will go, oh my God, I want 100 pounds on my spring. You're not going to valve float a flathead Ford. It doesn't turn that kind of RPMs anyway. And we've gone as little as 70 pounds, 65 pounds, and awesome, no problems, and it'll last forever. So that being said, pick the spring for your cam, and the manufacturer is going to tell you what spring pressure they want. Once you know what spring pressure you want, you know your height. I'm going to go and take you to the back, and we're going to show you how I'm going to use my spring tester to get all that set up. But while I'm here, we're going to go ahead and determine we need 2-inch. If this is 220, which actually it was, we're going to put in shims. Here's the shim. This is a VSI shim. You don't need to buy VSI. You can buy other people's brands. Why would you buy the VSI? VSI actually has a patented, it has little slots underneath here. Those are cooling slots to keep the heat off of the spring. Very cool. So I like VSI shims. There's our shim right there. Gonna go right there. I'm gonna take it to the back, and we're actually using 2 on the majority of them, which is 120 thousandths. And then we're going to put this back. It needs to go back in the block so that we can install it back and determine where we have. But that's what we're doing when you hear people are shimming their springs, that's what they're doing. They're adding a shim to the bottom of the spring. This hangs upside down, so it's the top of the spring. On most cars, the springs aren't upside down. On most cars, V8, Chevys, Fords, 302s, they're installed like this. On a flathead Ford, they're upside down. So if I use that it goes on the bottom of the spring, it's actually in the top. Don't hammer me about, Danny, you don't know what top and bottom is. All right, we're going to go to the back. But before we go to the back, I also have keepers. The factory keeper, which is right there. I'll do a close-up and take pictures of all of these parts so you'll see what I'm talking about. And you're wondering, what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what that means right here. Both of these keepers are in the same groove. And if you can see, and I'll zoom in closer so that you can see, they're at a different height. Okay, that one brings my pressure down, more pressure. This one offsets it up for less pressure. So if I can add a shim, or I can put an offset keeper either further down or further up. You probably didn't know that they made offset keepers. So a lot of times, instead of adding shims, we'll just change out the keeper and put an offset keeper. If I need to add a 60 shim and I can put offset keeper, done. We're going to put keepers anyway, so why add keepers and shims? We're going to get out there, and I'm going to show you this flathead Ford belongs to Lewis Brooks. We're setting up the valvetrain, and I'm going to go ahead and just run the camera, and you can see what I'm going through. And I'm actually doing every single cylinder. While I'm back there, you're going to want to know what's up with the shiny valve guides on the top side. Well, what's up is this particular block was a race engine that been ported. And the ports are pretty good sized ports. Well, when they ported these ports, this is the way that we got it. We touched them up and equalized them all, but they were previously ported. It was an older race motor. And now that the port is bigger, the guide actually sits in the hole, and it sits up higher. It's not sitting any higher, but the port's bigger. So as the airflow is coming in, it's going to be hitting, hear that? That's what the air's gonna be doing, trying to go around that valve guide. So I'm putting every valve guide in every hole, and I'm putting the clip in, I'm raising it all the way up, and then I'm marking where the port is. I'm taking this off, I'm walking over to the lathe, putting it in the lathe, get my angle, and I'm actually taking that wall right there, I'm lowering it down here, putting it back in the port. So now when we look down that port, it looks pretty cool. Air's gonna go right up there, and we don't have a big chunk of metal in there. Every guide is cut for every port. I can go generic and say take off 30 thousandths off each one, take off 80, take off 100, and then still have them all different spots. I know it makes no sense, and in a production shop it makes no sense. I have the ability to take my time with this one, so I have every guide cut for every port. Have you put a guide in a bore before on a flathead Ford? You'll notice some of them are snug, some are a little loose, some drop right through. What I've found is that when Ford bored all of these guides on there, Charlie and Chuck were off that day, so they didn't have CNC there. Okay, they had Bill doing it. And when Bill machined these, as you're boring, the cutter gets hotter. And if you get too aggressive with it, it expands. If the cutter expands, it's going to make the bore bigger. So depending on how fast and aggressive, how much coolant they were using, the bores aren't consistent. Some of them are real close. Some you'll find one that's just being real loose. I'm not picking on Bill either. So I knurl the guides. See the valve guide right there? If I need to do a video on how to knurl the valve guides, and you're thinking, I've heard of knurled guides before. I don't want to say wrong, you have heard of knurled guides before. Normally, we knurl the inside of the guide. Okay? When the guide gets loose, you can replace the guide. A flathead Ford, you replace the guide. You're just going to replace them. But let's say a Chevy or Ford. I always use Chevy and Ford. I'm going to start using Chrysler a lot more. Back in the old days, instead of replacing the guide, you would run a knurler through the inside of the guide. What it basically is, it looks like a tap. It's a carbide tool that looks like it has threads on it. It comes in from one side to the other and cuts grooves in it. When it cuts those grooves, it expands the metal around it. The valve won't fit in the hole anymore. You take a reamer and you ream it back to the original size. That's a knurled guide. That's not what I'm talking about. Went a long way to get you there, didn't I? I'm knurling the outside of the guide. See the outside right there? I'm knurling the outside of the guide, and I'm knurling the guide. Every one, see this one here? It's numbered. This is number 1. This is going in the number 1 hole. If I take this and put it on another one, it'll drop right in, but it fits that one just perfectly. So my tip, all my valve train machine work is done with this guide in the bore it's going to. I'll take you out back, and I'm going to show you how we're even going to lap the valves with the correct guide. I'm not going to take one guide and put it in and then lap the valves. I'm going to take the guide that I'm using. This is in one of our bills. If you come in to do a valve job, I have a set of guides that I have expanded already. That's what knurling does. It expands the guide. And then I'll have an intake and an exhaust one, and we'll use those as we do the valve job. So I am doing the valve job with a brand new guide. I also have the Sun and Tool. We don't need to get in there how to do a valve job on a flathead Ford. That will be another video if y'all care to see how to do a valve job on a flathead Ford. That's not what this is. All right, I've done enough talking up front. Generally what happens is I talk too much up front. Let's get out there, and I want to show you how we will talk about that when we get out there. All right, I hope y'all can see this, and I think it's important enough to know. It's important enough to know that we know we're doing the right thing. But here's an example. 2 valve guides. This valve guide, which all y'all flathead guys are gonna know, well, that's what they all do. Can you see that? I can put it in up here and it falls right out the bottom. Pretty much, and everybody's gonna tell me, well, yeah, all flatheads do that. Okay. This is the guide that goes in this hole. Look how snug it is, and it doesn't fall out the bottom. This is the guide that goes in this hole. And look at this. It's not falling out the bottom. It's nice and snug in there. And it moves. I'm not saying it's whoa. Excuse me that. All right, it's nice and snug in there. I'm not saying that it doesn't move. If I try to push it, I can push it out the other side. But the point being is that it's nice and snug in the bore. So it's never as crisp as the day it starts. Well, if your valve train is all but loose, anyway, I won't get there. I'm going to a little bit more than I should. I just thought I would let you know. Lewis, all of these guides have been chosen for this engine. It's not coincidence that every guide that's going in every hole doesn't just fall out the other end. These are picked for this engine. Not only that, like I said, there's number 3. There's the line. Even in the concentric of it, if I were to rotate this, I see a variance in the valve job. So once we get them, when we muck them all in, I'll actually put them in it while we do our valve job. I'll pick the guides. That's the first thing we do, is juggle guides and pick the ones we're going to do. Once again, thank you, Lewis, for this. It's actually very, very useful. So, there we are. I don't think that a lot of people may not known this, and a lot of flathead stuff is just done the old school way. There are things that we can do better. I like to do a flathead that lasts forever and is as crisp 5 years from now as the day we built it. All right, let's go ahead and do the guides. We're also going to, I'm going to go ahead and now and set my valves in here, and we're going to go ahead and look at these nice quality valves. It's a nice ProFlow valve. I love that valve. Yes, it is a Chevy valve, but it's not an inexpensive, cheap valve that you can just throw where you can. All right, since we're talking valves, these were the valves. All right, since we're talking valves, these are the valves that the customer sent for us to use. We've already done the valve job and did it more than once, because I did it with these, and we've already lapped the valves in each one is lapped for the hole it's going to go into, all ready to go. I just didn't like this heavy, bulky valve that's not doing anything for me. So I upgraded him to this valve. I don't know if you can see it. This is a one-piece stainless valve. This is the two-piece valve. All valves are welded right here, unless it's an aftermarket valve. But for the most part, they're welded right here. People don't realize that this is not one piece of metal. They put a weld here because they got to have a real hardened piece down here at the bottom. That all being said, it doesn't matter. It is a two-piece valve. We're using a one-piece stainless valve. I also love, you see right here, where it's not welded, it can be thinner. This is thicker because there's a weld right there. We don't want that big old part in the port. So we can actually get more airflow by just upgrading to this valve. Not only that, look at this, dude. It's a beautiful piece. So it's a stainless one piece. It has an undercut stem right here for airflow, and it's chrome plated, has a hardened tip. This is just the shit right here. So don't stop what you're doing. I'll put a link at the bottom for a set of valves like this. Just contact Shop Mom. Contact Shop Mom. We'll send you a set of valves. Don't worry about it. Okay. Now, I didn't say we're going to send you a set for free. This is the lifter that the customer sent, and there's somebody out there who's remachining the bottom faces, and you send them to them, they'll rebuild your lift and send them back. I did not like this for this reason. I don't know if you can see that line right there. As he was machining it, every place he stopped, he left a hump right there. What's going to happen with that hump right there, if you can see it or not? As he was machining it, he'd stop, left a hump. As this thing is spinning, it's going to stop on that hump right there, and it's going to wear the lifter prematurely. It's not a bad lifter. I like the lifter. I wish they'd done a better job refinishing the bottom. So what did we do? We have a set of aftermarket lifters, and it's a lightweight lifter. There's the replacement. The bottom is done a lot better. I have lube on it, but it's a much better lifter. It's actually even lighter than this one. I don't mind this one. I like it, everything, except I don't like the finish in the bottom. So we upgraded to the lifters. We've replaced the lifters, replaced the valves because I just didn't like them. Sorry. Okay, we have our valves. Look at that. I've already taken the time. Look at these dudes. I've already taken the time to put the lifters in here, and what we did is I used a feeler gauge, and I came in here and I checked my lash. Okay, so after I adjusted one and set my valve lash, I took a mic and I measured the lifters. And I went ahead on the bench, I turned them all over to this size. Went ahead and screwed them in all to here. Well, what does that do? That gets me real close right now. Now we can sit here and assemble this on the bench, and all I have to do is turn that adjuster maybe a half a turn. They're already real close. I bench did them by taking two and adjusting them. When we do a valve job, what we actually do is set the valve heights. Most people aren't going to do this, but I don't know if you can see. I don't know if you can see this little fixture that I came up with. And what we can actually do is come here on the deck and I can zero this in and get my valve heights. And we can sit here and get every valve exactly the same. So when we did the valve job, I actually set all my valve heights to within the thousands. I mean, if there's a thousands, I get all frustrated. So I know it doesn't matter, and everybody's going to say, it's a flathead, Danny. Why did it take you 2 years to build a flathead? Well, if you're going to build a flathead, you're going to build it right, and you're going to blueprint it. So every single valve is the same. If you know flatheads, you know from one side of the engine is not the same as the other. But they're all the same. So that's how I can bench this. I can adjust one, measure the lifter. If my cam grinder hit the base circle right, my valve adjustment is done. If my cam grinder varied in the base circle a little bit, I will know it. How am I going to know it? All these valves are brand new. They're all the same length. I have all my lifters within 1,000 set at the same height. I've set my valve job. Every seat is at the same height. If the cam base circle is off, I'm going to know it. And I'll adjust the valves here. But we don't take anything for chance. I know that it ain't worth it, why, but when we do a valve job here at Hill Country, I use this and we go ahead and set all your valves at the same height. Why not? All right. So now we know that by doing that, we can set two valves, measure them, and get them all set. So here I am back over here with my two valves. Look at that. And check this out. I don't know if you can see this or not. Look at that. See that? Look at that. That is perfection right there. Got my lash already set. The lash is set. And we're ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start assemblies. Next thing I'm going to do is we want to check the spring pressure. So to check the spring pressure, it is... All right, so here's our assembly right here. There's our assembly. I can't set the spring pressure here on my hand. So here's the assembly with the test spring. See that little test spring? I'm gonna go and put my line that I have going right up to the port. And it needs to be in here with the clip. So we'll put our clip in. It'll be... I a lot of times I have all kinds of screwdrivers that have different angles to them. And on the intake port is real cool because you can reach in here and push that dude down. Put your clip in and let it go back up. Look at there. All right. So I have it set in here. You can see the clip or not see the clip. Let's see. Maybe you can't. Maybe you can. There's a flashlight, and there's the clip right there on top. I can turn it a little bit. Oh, I can't. All right. Okay. So there's the clip right there on top. Goes in. You probably need, you already know all of this. So, and that's how I can set my valve lash, which I already have. And there's lash set. It's now got a clearance in here. And now I can measure from the bottom of the guide to the top of the retainer. And you're going to use something like this. And you're going to reach inside. And we're going to measure. There we are. See that? I don't know if you can see that. I'm using this. I'm turning here just to open it or close it until it gets right to the bottom of the spring pad, to the bottom of the retainer. So we're going to measure where the spring goes. What's the install height of the spring while the valve is closed? Not open, while the valve is closed. There it is. So what do we have? Then we'll take a caliper at 0. You're seeing it here first. We're at 2,195, so it's almost 2,200, which it may have been what they wanted, but we're 2.195. 2.195. We'll figure out what spring pressure we want and what height I need to set up. That will tell me how many shims we're going to use under here. Also, another tip in the shims is we have keepers. These are Chevy standard keepers, which is what you're going to use. And that's the standard Chevy keeper. Instead of stacking a bunch of shims in the bottom, if I need to make it tighter, what can I use? I can use an offset keeper. 50 offset keeper that will give me 50 thousandths less, which means one less shim. Always a good thing. A better offset here without having to stack up a lot of shims. I don't want to say there's no proper way to do it. Everybody has a different way to do it. It doesn't mean that anybody's wrong. As long as you have your right spring height, then the engine doesn't know any better. I kind of lean towards just the flathead, and this mentality doesn't really matter. But I like to keep the weight down on the guide as opposed to the weight on the retainer. We're talking very minimal weight, so 6 of these and a handful of these, or whatever they say. It's personal preference. I think why accelerate a part with more weight? It's not that much more weight, so it doesn't matter. Like I said, that you get the right install height. That's what's important. So how you do it, it doesn't matter. Put chewing gum down here, foil. You know I'm joking now, right? You do know I'm joking, right? Okay, let's move on getting these all set up so that we can move on to moving on. All right. All right, I hope you've enjoyed that. I've taken you out back. I've shown you all of the tricks that I use. And it's all here on the table now, and I can't take it back now unless I edit it out, and I'm not going to do that. Hopefully, I won't do that. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this has been enlightening, what I always say, or at least entertaining. Tell your dogs, tell your chickens, tell your cats, leave your neighbors alone. I'm going to get out of here, get to editing this, and we're out of here. We'll see you on the next one.